The major story of discussion in the NASCAR Winston Cup garage today is a very sad story. We've all followed together the story of Tara and Shawn Parker, Dale Jarrett's crew chief, and his wife over the last couple of years through her quest for a heart transplant, and a successful one, and a new baby coming into their life just over a month ago. Sadly, Tara was killed on Wednesday night in a car accident outside of Greensboro, North Carolina, along with two others. She was 29 years old.
The doorbell rang. Didn't really think much of it. Went over there and opened up the door, and it was two police officers. You remember Jagger's upstairs? The baby monitor's in my hand. It's going off with this echoing, child screaming. My family was in New York. I didn't have any family in Cornelius, so my family had to drive down. They didn't get down to the next day, and so it was.
Man, you had a garage full of family.
I had a garage full of family. I knew briefly of the accident, but I didn't know that it was Deborah Renshaw. Yeah. I didn't know that it was her.
The day NASCAR and all of us associated in any way with NASCAR forget its past, that's the day we don't have any future.
Shawn, I have dreaded asking about this since you and I first started. September of 2003.
September 11th.
That's my birthday. I didn't know that. Mm-hmm. I knew it was close. Just as much as you want to talk about, say what you want to say, but I'm not going to push you to say anything.
We are very open in our family about it. I was at home. Jagger was 6 weeks old, approximately. It was my first night with just me and this child that's 6 weeks old. What is he doing? Sleeping and crying and pooping, right? But I was home. Tara and her two sisters were off to Greensboro to a concert. Fleetwood Mac.
Now, were you still with Robert?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
On their return home, they were rear-ended by a drunk driver on the interstate.
Were they in a limo?
They were in a limousine.
Yeah.
Extended version limo. They were on a ramp, and it was construction, and there was much emerging and cones, and so things were kind of backed up a little bit. They were kind of at the bottom of the ramp, getting ready to merge into the go lane and kind of proceed on.
Was this in Greensboro?
In Greensboro.
Okay.
Just outside of the mall.
Now, where were you living at the time?
At Cornelius.
Okay.
Lake Norman. And they were rear-ended by a drunk driver. And the car exploded. It caught fire and exploded, and under impact, it crushed the back of the vehicle and locked the doors where they couldn't open. Well, you can envision this crumpled up stretch limo that kind of curled up to a ball, and everything's mangled and dented and where you couldn't open any doors. The driver had jumped out to try to open the door, but because of the heat from the fire, from the impact where the gas tank exploded, he couldn't do nothing. They were trapped inside. So he survived, the driver. And
the driver of the limo.
The driver of the limo survived. That was them and 3 girls that were in the back.
The other guy, the other person.
And the driver, the drunk driver, yes, he survived. So that happened after the concert. I'm at home. It's becoming 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Jagger's crying, wants a bottle. So I get up. I go make the bottle, but I realize that Tara's not home. Which didn't really put everything together. You know, I figured they're coming from Greensboro. It's late. They're in a limo. I knew she was in a limo. They would bring her back home. Well, at that same time, something woke when I woke up from him wanting a bottle. As I was coming down the stairs, I saw lights pulling in my driveway. She's home. Perfect. You're up. You're energized. You just came from the concert. I'll make the bottle. You can go feed him. I'm going back to bed because I got to get up and go to work in the morning. The doorbell rang. Didn't really think much of it. Went over there and opened up the door, and it was 2 police officers. You remember Jagger's upstairs, the baby monitor's in my hand. It's going off with this echoing, child screaming. I'm opening up the door, and I'm sure they're probably wondering, what in the hell is going on? Knowing they're getting ready to tell me a tragedy story, but they don't know what I've got going on in the house. Because they're probably not expecting, a child. And they make sure they identified who I was at first. I said, and I'm waiting, tell me what's going on here. She got arrested. They got into a fight. I don't know what's going on here. I'm not thinking accident. Last thing I'm thinking of in my mind is an accident. And he said there has been an accident. He described the details of the location. Not really going into many details about how it happened. Because I think legally they couldn't really say much. They have to tell you the tragedy side. And he said there was an accident, and I'm like, okay, where are they at? What, what? He said they didn't make it. And hearing them words, they didn't make it. Well, let me back up. He was telling me about Tara. He wouldn't tell me about the other 2 because he was there to tell me about Tara's identity. And he said she didn't make it. Because I'm thinking, well, hospital, we'll get in the car, we'll head that way, we'll go meet. And they said, I'm sorry, they didn't make it. So to hear them words, and it really, I didn't know what them words meant at first. It's early in the morning. And so I had an obligation that I had to call her parents and let them know because I'm the only one that was being told this information at the time because they knew where I lived and her information was the only one that was listed in the itinerary of Tara Parker. They didn't say anything about her other 2 sisters where they didn't know who their parents were.
Where did they live?
In Moxville, between
Really?
Statesville and Greensboro, Winston-Salem area. So I had to make that phone call. She was very close to her grandmother. She called her nanny. So that's who I had to call first because I knew the relationship that she had with her grandparents. So I called them first. She didn't answer.
Is that Moxville too?
Yep. But it's 4 o'clock in the morning. Not many people answer their phone. So then I called her dad and told him what happened. But again, I didn't have all the details. All I know is there's been an accident. They didn't make it. I don't know where they are. I don't know exactly where this accident happened at because I'm not familiar with Greensboro. I know of it because, being in that area, but I didn't travel it every day, so I wouldn't really, all these things. And so I called her dad, told him what went on, and I got a hold of her mom, and she lived over in Level Cross area, so she was very close to the situation. And she worked in the healthcare business, respiratory, maybe something like that. So she kind of had some connections to kind of hospitals to kind of get some more information. I didn't have. All I know is I just lost my wife. My son's upstairs crying, screaming, wanting a bottle. I got 2 police officers at my front door. There's a lot going on here in this time period. So the police left. They did their diligence. I'm making these phone calls. Actually, they walked in, and when I was on the couch, I was calling, and they made sure I was okay. I mean, I will give them the credit that they just didn't give me the information to left. They did come in and sit down. But after like a quick 5 minutes or so, I said, I'm good, we'll deal. So I called my next door neighbor. And because she was close with Tara and all that. And then the next person that I called, it was early in the morning. It was Doug and Whitney Yates. Because we were close enough with them that I needed their support. Whitney was there for Tara with Jagger. She kind of helped her as, Whitney had kids. She was helping Tara become a mom. So she was there a little bit with Jagger. So I called them, and they were at my house very quickly. And so the process just went on that day, trying to find out more information, what went on, what happened. Social services showed up to my door. Literally that afternoon, because once the media caught wind of this story, it went viral in our industry. So with Jagger's adoption still not finalized, they were there to protect Jagger, make sure, everything was okay. So I had to deal with that. My parents lived in New York. My family was in New York. I didn't have any family in Cornelius, so my family had to drive down. They didn't get down to the next day, and so it was.
Man, you had a garage full of family.
I had a garage full of family that was very supportive. Between like Tara's family, which they were grieving too. They had to deal with it them side too. So they couldn't be there just for me the entire time. Although with Jagger, they knew that was the connecting point. So, they did what they could in their grieving process as well. But the support that I had from the NASCAR community, the garage, friends, family, and this deal was very touching, very overwhelming, and very supportive. Got calls from Mike Helton, Roger Penske. The drivers that I'd worked for they were all there. But I didn't know the pattern that I was getting ready to take. I had a lot to... How do I plan a funeral? Never done it. And it was hard. Not alone having a 6-week-old son, that I'm working in an industry that's 11 and a half month season, a lot of hours and a lot of time away from home. How am I going to make this work? This is all things that within the next 3 or 4 days that I had to figure out quickly. How am I going to make this work? And we made it work.
Who did you lean on most? Who did you lean on most in those 2 or 3 days as you were trying to figure everything out within the industry? You talked about Doug, but who all did you talk to heart to heart?
Well, I had a good friend of mine, Jason Burdett. Jason was from upstate New York area as well, and he'd been down, and he was actually working with me. He was my car chief at Robert Yates at the same time. And I knew I could rely on him to take care of the racing. He was handling that. But as far as like Whitney Yates was a big supporter, I leaned on her quite a bit. And then mostly I took care of Jagger myself. We still had people kind of coming in and out, would feed them, take care of them, play with them type deal. But then her grandmother, or nanny, she would come down and stay with me at the house to help with Jagger because she knew I had to go back to work. I had to, this is my life. I mean, once we got through the processes of planning, funeral, celebration, things we were going to do, I had to get back to work. And so that's when she stepped in. But the whole garage as a whole, I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't with their support.
How did you handle the next few months? Were you? Did you go back on the road?
Yep. I missed one race. Was New Hampshire. And I knew the team could handle it. We had people in place. I was just a crew chief then. I wasn't going over the wall, so it wasn't like a
so
real
you
place.
were crew chief.
Yes, for Dale Jarrett at the time.
Okay.
And I started at the beginning of that year with Elliott Sadler underneath Raymond Fox with the 38 car, M&M's car. They had some transition changes happen on the 88 prior to May. They moved me over there. That's how I became the crew chief for the 88, about halfway through that year. But we had good people in place and support staff, so I didn't really have to worry about, what was going on at the racetrack because they handled it. And we had people that had experience. It wasn't from my leadership or anything like that. There was just people that knew what to do. And everybody stepped up. And I missed that one race. But then after that, I think we went back to Dover. Maybe I've been to the next race. And I attended back to that and, tried to get back to normal as much as we could.
How divided did you feel? Because obviously you got a big job in being Dale Jarrett's crew chief. That's a big deal. Robert Yates Racing. But then you've also got this newborn at home.
Well, remember, I had a little bit of training earlier when I was making that circle between Concord, Winston-Salem, Cornelius, back to my house circle. So I knew I had to separate some things and do. And I tried to be home by 5 o'clock every day. At least for the next little bit till we kind of got things going because we had guys in the shop and most people only worked till 5 anyways. But when I went home, I was dad. And I did what I could for laundry, the bottle cleaning, the cleaning of the house. Now like I said, her grandmother, Nanny, was staying there at the house and she did a lot of stuff too. But she needed a break too. She was taking care of Jagger during the day. Yeah. And then at 5 o'clock, last thing she wanted was, more of it. She needed a break too. So it was kind of shifts, changed. And so it worked out. And like I said, when we were leaving for races on weekends, it was new for me because here I am leaving a child at home that I'm still trying to figure out how to raise a child and how to grow up as a parent. And but we made it work. It was I think my parents did a good job raising me and sending me on my way to the point of we made it work.
So 2004, you went to the Truck Series with Ted Musgrave. Was that in response maybe to what had happened to maybe give you a little more time?
Well, a little bit to that story. I went to the Truck Series because I lost my job at Robert Yates at the end of 2003. Some related to the new management team that came into Robert Yates. we struggled quite a bit as an organization, 2003 at Robert Yates as a whole. We were searching. We were trying to find anything we could. It was the setup of the week, and it was this car of the week. It was this chat. You know, it was just everything. It was like throw it against the wall, see what will stick, and if it does, that's what we're going with. So there was a lot of searching to find speed, find results. So at the end of the year, they were bringing in a new management team. And my situation was being pushed out. Never really was told you're not going to be the crew chief anymore, but I could almost read the writing on the wall and what was going on here. Been in the sport long enough. And the ones that were coming in, I mean, they're not going to be the motor coach drivers. They're not going to be the truck drivers. I mean, these are crew chiefs that are coming in, and they were going to take over. And so Raymond on the 38 and myself on the 88 got repositioned. Raymond stuck with the 38 because he was very close with the family and, you know, had a great relationship with Robert and Doug and Caroline and the whole Yates family. But I had a situation where I was kind of being pushed out. Didn't really have a position that I was being put in. I'll say I was the highest paid roll bar padding installer that Robert Yates ever had. I was installing roll bar padding in the fab shop. Still listed as crew chief, although I knew my position was being eliminated and being replaced. But I was never told that because I had a contract that they knew they were going to have to work through. So with me still showing up to work every day, there had to be some stuff you had to work through with contracts. To get into another whole story. But when I left there, I knew I had a lifestyle change that I was going to have to make anyways. And the Truck Series schedule seemed very fitting to me. Seemed enjoyable. They were racers. The schedule was easy. I was like, let me try this. So I met with Jimmy Smith, and we worked some stuff out, and I ended up over there.
You can answer this question or not, but if it was me, my response would be, I've just had this incredibly traumatic experience. And you're going to shove me out the door? Did you have that kind of sense?
I had that mindset, but I knew that I had a contract. And I don't know how big contracts were back then. I knew this was my first one. It was life-changing for me when I signed it because it was, a huge increase from where I had been over the past few years. When I was going through everything with Tara, handling estate stuff, personal stuff, I had a lawyer. I had to retain a lawyer. And I still had that lawyer when I saw this transitioning going through. So I handed that piece of paper over to them, and I said, y'all read through this and see where we are. Never had a conversation with Robert, Doug, Eddie Duhant, Mike Ford, the ones that were coming in. They were getting ready to change the whole thing. I never had a conversation with them. But I had a piece of paper. And so I let them read it, the lawyer read it, and kind of go there. But I was going through a transition of a lawsuit against Ford Motor Company through the accident.
They made the limo?
Yeah, well, they were the designer of the limo, although that wasn't the conversion of it. So they were trying to opt out, but I was in lawsuit. It's just how life works today. Unfortunately, you just go through these lawsuits and sue, and have these things going on. And I was in that period, and you got to remember, Robert Yates Racing was a huge Ford manufacturer team. They would never say anything to me about it, but I brought it to their attention that this was getting ready to happen. I had to be fair with Robert and Doug and the management team to let them know this is part of life. It's not, I don't want to go through this, but I just went through it tragic. That's just how it works. So I don't know if that had anything to do with it. It probably did. Although, because they didn't want the publicity. They didn't want the negativity. So I don't know truthfully if that ever had an impact on it. In my heart, I think it does, or did. But
now, did you feel that this was a Robert and Doug thing, or did you feel this was whoever they were bringing in?
Whoever they were bringing in was a big pusher of it. Now, I think they got support. I wouldn't say so much Doug, because Doug had transitioned off to the engine shop, and he was starting a program in a shop out of this world. He was the program that he was starting with. I think Roush was starting to become a partner with him at that time, and through the Ford, umbrella, and they were starting to collaborate together. So he was busy with that. He really didn't get into the car side and the business, even though his name was on the wall. He was more or less taking the engine shop, and this is my focus.
Yeah.
And Robert was this guy that, he was a racer. He wanted to win. He come from the 28 car to the 88 car with Ernie Irvin and Davey Allison and, Dale Jarrett to not winning races. And he was looking, he had pressure from sponsors, personnel, drivers. He was wanting to win again, and he just wasn't getting it. So when he thought he could bring somebody else in that could make the operation better, looking back at it today, it was a failure, just like it was prior to me leaving. They were not successful after that. Not saying that because of me or whatever, but the new management never changed anything, never made the program better. Unfortunately, because Robert and Doug are phenomenal people. I love them to death, and I miss the day that, Robert's not here no more, but the conversations that we had, and I see the success that Doug is having, it's just incredible. But the transition that changed, they were no more successful. It was just the flavor of the week is what we called it, unfortunately. But we moved on, and here we are.
All right, so I'm going to play devil's advocate just a second. Was there ever a picture painted to you as bringing these guys in was a way to help lift a burden off of you?
No.
Okay, all right.
No conversation.
Because of everything that had happened, they're going to bring in some people just lift a burden off your shoulder.
Because Homestead was the last race on the schedule at that time. And I remember being down there and reading in the Winston Cup scene some articles that was written. And I don't know who the editor was, but it was an article was in there. And it was mentioned about the changes coming to Robert Yates Racing. Didn't specifically say how it was going to change, but we knew changes were coming. And when we asked about it, or I asked about it, no, I don't know where that came from. I don't know, And then everything that's going on, I'm battling a young child at home I'm working 7 days a week. I got a lawsuit going on. You get this pressure of not running very well. You're trying to be successful. You had everything there. I mean, the support from the sponsors was there, the technology of the cars, everything that we had equipment-wise, and it was all to us. We just could not make it work. And then at the end of when they got into 04 and they couldn't make it work either, I felt a lot better. Because I put pressure on me because I wanted to be, but I knew that I had a lot that just happened and I probably was not giving my best effort to it. But when we got to 04 and it was the same, okay, here we go.
So you work in the truck series for a year, and then you go to Bruco Motorsports. Did you actually go to Kentucky? Did you actually move to Kentucky?
So the Ted Musgrave, Jim Smith operation was a short stint. It just didn't work, right? I think we went about 4 or 5 months, got to May, but back then, I think the schedule, you're probably only 3 or 4 races in the first 4 months, I think is the way it was. And it just didn't work. Things that we wanted to do, try to make them like cup setups and things, it just wasn't working. That's on me. I'll take that. But I didn't expect to be in a situation that quickly to have to change jobs, because I had been very fortunate 10, 12 years prior to that everywhere I went, because I had good relationships and I had good success with the people that surrounded me. It wasn't all me. There's people underneath me, above me. I had a good team everywhere I went. So for that short stint to happen, it really hit me hard. And at the same time, my wife now, Deborah Renshaw, had met that same particular year. Well, her living in Kentucky at the time is where the connection came from Bruco with Clarence Brewer with Deborah, because I came over here with her a little bit in between the time after the Ted Musgrave situation. I came to Kentucky with her for a little bit, and I kind of knew Stuart Cooper, Newt Moore, Greg Biffle was driving their nationwide car at the time, because I knew him from Roush. So I just kind of made a phone call to Todd Wilkerson, who was a general manager, and with Clarence, went and met Clarence. And I just kind of did it as a consultant deal because, again, I'm still going through this transition of a legal battle. I'm having to go back and forth to North Carolina. I got a legal battle going on. I got a 6-month-old son now. Not 6 weeks, he's 6 months. And so my life was changing. I was going through another phase of things. So I just did kind of consultant work with him and just to kind of help him out a little bit. And that's kind of where that started.
How did you and Deborah meet?
We were in Daytona. I was down there with Ted Musgrave, and she was in the ARCA series, and they were there a couple days prior to the truck showing up. And I left work in North Carolina one day evening, and I was driving down, and my motorhome was there. And when I got to Daytona about, 1 o'clock in the morning, they were kind of all sitting out in the horseshoe of the speedway, and that's our motorhomes were parked side by side. And she had an issue with her car owner in the ARCA series, and she removed herself from the seat of the ARCA car
At Daytona?
At Daytona. And I met Deborah that night after all this, and she was telling me the story. how when they were down there testing, they were much faster than they were. And, Daytona with Cup cars or ARCA cars, it's pretty much engine and, what you have during your testing period is about what you'll come back with for Speedway. So you kind of have a rough deal. But for her situation and her teammate, they were like a flip-flop. Like she was like half a second slower than she was testing, and he was a half a second quicker. So there was some shenanigans or some stuff that kind of went on back at the shop that, probably happened. Can we prove it? No, but do we have a good idea? Yeah. So she was telling me the story. She took herself out of the seat, and we met that night, went to Waffle House in Daytona on Speedway Boulevard, and that's where it all started.
Well, Waffle House is where all great romances start.
That's right. That's right.
She had been touched by tragedy as well.
Yes.
With the ARCA wreck. Mm-hmm. Was that something that brought you two together? Was it something that you talked to, or was it sort of an unspoken bond?
It was unspoken. I knew briefly of the accident, but I didn't know that it was Deborah Renshaw. Okay. I didn't know that it was her. I mean, I knew of the series, I knew of the people, but I didn't know that it was her situation. And we talked about it that night after putting two together, because here I am meeting her for the very first time. And, she's upset. She's ripping up her postcards, and, and I hold up, a little of her face of it, and I ring her doorbell in her motorhome, and I'm like, hey, can you sign this? I just got to Daytona. It was 1:00 in the morning. My adrenaline was high. I wasn't ready to get in my motorhome and go to bed. I'm in Daytona, getting ready to crew chief a Craftsman Trucks, knowing that we have a very good shot of winning this race with Ted Musgrave and Mopar, and like I'm pumped up. And, here she is all upset and mad because she just got out of her car and at the time, put her boyfriend in it. Her boyfriend, Chad Blunt, was the one that took her seat. And that wasn't her decision. That was the car owner's decision at the time, which, as you know, we probably could imagine didn't go over too well. So that probably escalated a little bit of the frustration the night we met. But she stayed, hung out, and supported the ARCA race, watching it, because she was in that series. She was going to continue on. And then also was there. We met, and I met her parents, met her family, because they were all there down there to support her racing. And here she's not going to race. So they all supported me. Didn't even know who I was. And but they knew of my situation. Being everybody in the industry kind of knew my situation. And so that's kind of how we met.
So you left the sport in August of 2008.
Yep.
Why? And how?
So when I went to Bruco here in Kentucky, it was bought out from a gentleman, team, Mike Curb and Gary Baker. Gary Baker, as we know, used to own Bristol Motor Speedway back in the days. Smart businessman. Mike Curb, smart businessman. But they couldn't run a damn race team to save their lives. So they bought everything from Bruco, all the assets, the equipment, the people, and we built a shop in northern Nashville. Went into an old Mattress Warehouse building and created this shop. Newt Moore was crew chief. He was going to be Brad Baker's crew chief, which was Gary's son. And I was going to crew chief Brad Coleman with the Kleenex program. And I was excited about it. Going into a new shop. It's in Nashville. great owners. You know, we built this place from the ground up. You know, gonna be phenomenal. Well, lo and behold, money became an issue short after the season started. For whatever reason, we had trucks that would be in Oklahoma at a truck stop. They couldn't put fuel in the trucks. Credit cards wouldn't work.
Wow.
It's okay. My phone rings 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. You know, they're headed to Phoenix or they're heading, you know, West Coast going somewhere. They can't put fuel. So my phone rings. I give them my credit card over the phone. Away they go. Don't think nothing of it. Get out there, get reimbursed. You know, I go in the office the next day. Hey, the credit cards didn't work. Talk to the office. Oh, yeah, I got to transfer money. You know, okay, it's new business kind of thing starting up. Well, it happened too often.
Yeah.
And not that it was a problem, but it wasn't a problem. You know, like, okay, we worked through it. You know, they got a deal. But then it was, as the season kind of was getting halfway point, we had vendors in North Carolina because we were in Nashville, and a lot of our suppliers and vendors were in Charlotte. We'd send a truck every Monday, go over there, make the rounds, pick everything up, bring it back. Well, it got to the point where one of our suppliers would not give us any parts because the bill hadn't been paid. So he called me personally on my cell phone. He's like, hey, I can't send you transmissions over because they haven't paid their bill and it's 120 days late. I said, man, I understand. Here's a relationship that I built prior that I was using a favor up with him. I didn't have a transmission to go to Watkins Glen. It was a road course transmission. So he finally let it go, put it on the truck, brought it back. At that same time, my daughter was soon to be born.
With Deborah.
With Deborah. And I'm thinking, I see her lifestyle with her family business. Things are going good. I'm stressing out because things aren't going good. Do I really want to do this? And it was a quick decision of, I'm done. It wasn't going to be dragged out. Well, I'm going to work the last 10 races and I'm done retiring after this. Before I loaded to go to Watkins Glen was my home track from New York. Brad Coleman was a good road racer, and I thought we had a pretty good chance to have a good finish coming out there. Well, I decided that was going to be my last race. I was going to end right here, win, lose, or draw, whatever we did. I did have a conversation with Brad and his family and his father that I was going to be done after this race because I was their crew chief. I mean, they relied on me to have success for him. And it wasn't shortly after that Brad decided to leave the program as well. But when my daughter was born at the end of July, I just decided that I'm done. And I walked away. I was happy with my decision. I didn't know what the hell I was going to do because for the last 18 to 20 years, all I've done is worked on race cars. I don't have a resume. What am I going to do? I didn't have a clue. So I took a little bit of time off. We were living here in Kentucky. Took a little bit of time off. And I was racing go-karts. I was piddling with the little cars here and there. And I just had some time for myself. So I took the next couple months and worked on my go-karts. I cleaned tires. I cleaned parts. I loaded up on weekends and went to Talladega Short Track. I went to SEMO Raceway in Missouri and race go-kart. I just had fun. But I knew I was going to have a job. So.
Now, were you and Deborah married at that point?
Deborah and I married in 2006.
Okay.
So she was in the business, but she was also transitioning to opening her own boutique store. So
She was in the business,
in automotive business. I'm sorry. She was racing a little bit, and then her time come where she was like, you know what, I'm done racing too. I'm going in the automotive business with my family car business. But then she had a dream to be a women's boutique owner, and she went down that road. But again, I didn't know what I was going to do.
I got that eye roll on camera, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like, what is this?
Yeah.
But I had a conversation with my father-in-law, now Mr. Renshaw at the time, of maybe coming into the car business. Very successful, 4 car dealerships, 7 franchises, South Central Kentucky, doing well. But what am I going to do? I've worked on cars. I've motors in and out, worked on them, set them up. That was what I did. I didn't work on street cars.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I was going to do. Did he want me to be a mechanic? I wasn't really interested in that. So I went through a lot of training. I went through a lot of each department for about 3 to 4 months and worked with each manager in each department to understand the flow, the business, how it worked, how it operated, day in and day out. Came here every morning. I was just another employee. Just because I was married into the family, I was not wanted to be treated any differently. And that was the discussion I had with each manager when I went into them departments. You treat me just like you would any other employee. Just because I'm married and family, that's it. That's my only title. So I did that. Went through that for about a little over a year. And then I went back to school for another year in Washington, D.C.
Really?
Which is called National Auto Dealers Academy. And it's a year-long program. And you go and you go for a week and you come home for 4 weeks and you got homework and it just goes every department. And when I graduated from there, so I spent a lot of time in D.C. And after that, they come back and I was named the vice president of our fixed operations of our 4 stores, which is overseeing all of our parts and service departments at our dealerships. So 16 years later, here I am. And now Deborah's in the business as well. Day in and day out operations. And so we're a team. Now she works up front, I work in the back. We do, spend a lot of time together, because we have to work together as a team. And I think the foundation, the relationship, the type of person they have created Deborah to be, and how they tried to mold me out of racing to where I am today has made it where we have our differences. Don't get me wrong. We have a lot of differences, but we've all grown through them. We work through them, and we respect one another, especially in the family business. So that's a lot.
So you have Jagger with Tara, and then you've got how many with Deborah?
Julianne, 1, and she is 15. Athletic to the extreme. Eats, breathes, sleeps softball. We try to get her into racing a little bit. And that didn't last very long in quarter midgets. So when that didn't go through, we just kind of, went through the school sports things as they were growing up. And when she got to about 6th, 7th grade, she really latched on to the softball. So we spent a lot of our time traveling the country. Colorado, Kansas City, Dallas, New York, North Carolina. Chicago, Indianapolis, we play some high intense travel softball. And she's out of a team that's based out of Indianapolis, Indiana. So she's on that team along with her school team. So that occupies a lot of our summer. And it's just like being in racing. We get in the motorhome, we load our dogs up, we drive to the ballpark, we camp out for 2-3 days, we get all done, we load up, we head home. And then we turn everything around and start that again. And so she's
with her mama being a race car driver and her daddy being a racing mechanic, she didn't have a chance when it came to being competitive.
No, and she balances it well because she's very competitive herself. She got into all-star cheer 3 years ago. Her team won the Triple Crown, so to speak. So they won Indianapolis Nationals, Dallas Nationals, and the finale, which is the Daytona 500 to us at Walt Disney World. Her team won all 3 of those in the same year, and she retired cheerleading after that. So she can say she ended on a good note, but yeah, she's very competitive, especially with her brother. He's 20 now, so he's kind of slowly transitioning into the car business as well, making sure it's the right fit for him. And so, but yes, when they're together, they're very competitive, just like any other brother and sister, bickering, picking at each other, and sometimes we got to step in and separate them because they just, but because one's adopted and one's biological, you never know the difference between the two of them because Julianne treats Jagger just like it's her own, and Jagger treats Julianne just like it's his own, or, like biological. So the adoption thing is there. He doesn't have any questions about it anymore because he's matured now and he's probably done enough research to find it out on his own. But if he has any questions for me, I do answer it for him. Try to the best I can. So it's our family. It's what we enjoy.